poll.
All of you understand everything about CCRG already? Man, y'all are all stars. We're not needed, Dr. Edwards.
That's fine.
What you got, Mr. James?
I have a bunch of questions.
Go ahead.
A bunch of questions.
Good.
Okay. Back when I taught it, there's some differences. I think it was all multiple choice back then. I went through it and it seems like everything here was multiple choice, short answer, and so forth. So I think the kids gonna have a harder time with it. Dealing with a bunch of fractions and everything else. Even honors kids would have a difficult time in trying to do this. My understanding is they're gonna be able to use the calculator. They couldn't use the calculator last time, correct?
This time, yes, they will be able to actually use the calculator.
Okay, because I was just wondering, because when the demo, they said they couldn't use the calculator, so I just want to be sure.
No, with the course itself, they will be able to use the calculator. And even with the test, they will be able to use the calculator.
Okay. Also, would this go in with Canvas?
So it is supposed to be a single sign-on in NC Ed Cloud. DPI has told us that they are still working on making that happen. So it will not be inside of Canvas, but it will be inside NC Ed Cloud. So it will still be a single sign-on. Hopefully.
Okay. How would that work when they're at home?
Right, they can still log into it just like they would log into your Canvas page or into All in Learning or whatever is in the NC Ed Cloud. It will just be another app in there, is my understanding. But that has not happened yet.
What, through Clever, Melissa, through Clever, or just another app on the NC Ed page cloud?
That I am not sure of. They said in the last email, and Dr. Edwards, correct me if I'm wrong, but that DPI is still working on the background technology part of that.
Yes, they are.
So we are just waiting on DPI to send us the go ahead so that we can actually get you guys in there as teachers and all that good stuff.
So even when you're in there as teachers, you'll be able to see some of the stuff, but there's some things that you may not be able to access, quite simply because you won't have students in the accounts yet. Any other questions?
How are we going to, those kids who are virtual, you really need to have a lot of communications going on. If not, it's going to take a lot longer for this course to go through the process. When I told it, I mean, my kids, it took about the whole semester.
Okay.
You got 8 units. So, it's not easy. I was surprised. I mean, I went through the tests, the demo, and most of the math they haven't seen since the 7th and 8th grade.
Right.
And the kids that I found like did the best were those who probably took carpentry or courses like that, because there they utilize a lot of this math. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about the math part. I mean,
which with one of the things we'll also be discussing is that when you have your students in your classroom, it's going to be kind of based on what that student's career path is, as to kind of get them and encourage them to be able to actually finish the tier 1 or tier 2, whichever way they're going. Because some students may decide that they don't need it, or they may not want to do it when you have them in your classroom. But it's, of course, for all those students that are in the math 4 that are between the GPA range of 2.2 and 2.79. For those students, encouraging them to be able to do it, and they do the math, like you said, the fractions and stuff. They have not seen that in a while, because we've given them the calculator, so they haven't really had to do it on to that extent. So this is one of those things that may be a teaching point where you may have to provide some front load knowledge or something, some type of examples for those students to get them to kind of actually understand it and be able to move forward through the tiers. One of the things we also discussed in our group is some of the hangups that have been, I guess, told or demonstrated as far as those students that are going through the tiers, the areas that they've had the biggest issues. Which of course, like you said, fractions definitely is going to be a biggie. But then we also found that the geometry was also an issue. So kind of giving them information or teaching those mini sessions for those students that are in that area or in that particular topic at the time will probably be something that would have to consider in the classroom. And by the way, shout out to Ms. Clark. I did get all those PowerPoints and I have them uploaded, and I will be putting those in Canvas for the math teachers too.
All right, so as we are moving on, we gotten some questions for the whole group, and we are going to dive a little bit deeper into our content areas in just a moment, but just thinking big picture, are there any issues that you can foresee for your school or for your students? So Mr. James just mentioned those virtual students and thinking about how, you know, you're going to get to those students, because yes, they will be in the course as well. Are there any other issues that you have identified or your team at school or anything you can think of overall that we may need to look at or think about at this point?
One thing that Sarah Painter and I were kind of talking about a little bit was that when the kids when they get a question wrong, it looks like it kind of just directs them to like a set of text with notes, which, I mean, obviously we want them to read that and we want them to like use that to help them. But with the kids in front of us, we can help them make sure that they're understanding and getting on the right track. But I just kind of see a lot of at-home kids probably getting frustrated because when I've used things like No Red Ink or any other kind of program that like directs them to a lesson where they just have to read, they just skip right past it and they just keep going and getting it wrong until they either eventually get it right or they just give up. So I'm kind of trying to figure out how we're gonna get those at-home kids to like just stop and get the help that they need when they need it versus just getting frustrated because they have to keep, like reading a set of notes over and over again or whatever.
Right. It just looked like text on the page, text on the page, text on the page.
I noticed that too, and I kind of thought the same thing, that, if a student is already they're not getting this point, then them just reading the text is probably not the best way to, give that information to them. So yeah, I kind of thought the same thing that you guys were thinking as I was going through the demo. And so I think those will be the areas that you will really have to dive in and kind of use your own instruction to support a lot of times, because like you said, those students, they're not going to just keep reading all that text on the page to really learn it. And so that's going to probably be one of the biggest issues, I think, in the English part, is that, and I don't know how the math is set up, but just seeing how they don't really have activities. It's more just read it and figure it out. I think that's where you'll have to step in.
Well, in the test itself, I took one of the little practice, whatever it's called, the little practice thing. I'm brain dead right now. Mm-hmm. And that gave a different passage for every single question.
It did.
I don't see a lot of students even taking that seriously, because it's one thing to give them a passage and ask them 5 questions that came from that passage. And no, we didn't make it. That's why I didn't say anything to begin with, because I don't see the problems that I'm seeing right now as being problems that we can particularly fix.
Right. And that first diagnostic test, even me sitting through it myself, reading it, it took me a while. just because it is so much reading. So I know it's going to be a situation where we're really going to have to prepare our kids for what they're getting ready to take. And it makes it very, very difficult. But you know, your kids too, the flip side of that, the kids that understand the value of what they're doing, you know, they understand they're getting college credit for this. So less, you know, or not college credit, but possibly not having to take those courses at community college, maybe just understanding the purpose, that'll get some of your kids that may have been hesitant on board with you too. So yeah, I noticed that as well. It's a lot of reading for the English diagnostic.
Also from the math aspect, the work keys coming up, a lot of this math is the same type of math that you find on work keys also. So I would probably push that for the kids as far as the math end, that a lot of this they'll see again on work keys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll be a good selling point too, I think, for the students. Any other big issues you see technology-wise or anything like that for your school or for your students? Anything overall? And we can dive into the English and math stuff a little bit later, but any big things that you guys have identified thus far?
I mentioned in the chat, I don't know if y'all saw it, but I am having difficulty accessing the demo. I can't get in again.
Okay. I'll send you that information. We'll figure out what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, and so for our last question before we break out and get into our content a little bit, what areas do we need clarification? Are there been any big areas that you're like, that just is vague or I'm unsure of, anything like that that we need to get clarification on before we move forward?
It was taught that we were going to incorporate this into the courses that we were taking. I mean, that we were teaching them in, like, but there's no relationship as far as the math 4 with this type of math. So I mean, I plan on just teaching it as 2 separate courses.
Okay.
I don't see how, I mean, I can't incorporate it. The last 2 modules, you could do some of that.
And that is the thing that is somewhat of an issue with this, because it does not correlate with the Math 4 curriculum. So how you decide to do it in your classroom is really going to be up to you, whether you decide to use it or do it at the beginning of the course, or whether you decide to incorporate it as you go along, or however you intend to do it in your classroom is really going to be based on your teaching style and what you're comfortable with. So what we will be doing though is after the implementation process and after the spring, kind of trying to go back and see what things worked and what didn't work. Because it's kind of hard to say what it's going to be like now until you actually get through the process of having done it.
I'm sorry, this is Susan Allen.
Uh-huh.
Thinking about the math also, since I'm at South Central and I'm teaching the standard math 4, there's a really excellent possibility that I'm going to have some kids that are doing the CCRG in the same class with kids that don't have to do the CCRG. So I'm real concerned with how do I make one set of kids do it and the other set sit back and say, well, we don't have to do it, thank God.
Oh, I thought we had to do it for everybody. Is that just English that has to do it for the whole class?
Our plan for this semester is that in our Math 4 and our English 4, that we are going to put it in for all the students that are enrolled in those courses. So even if a student says, well, I'm not going to community college, I don't have to do it. If they're in your standard English 4, they are going to get the course. The course will be assigned to them.
Is that the same for the math?
It is. And what I would probably suggest for those students that feel like they don't need it, if there was a way you could do it as an extra credit or something like that, some type of incentive for those students. This is a time, I guess, you kind of have to be creative in figuring out what can I do to get these other students to complete it, as well as those that actually have to do it. Because even though they may not need it necessarily for their career path or where they're going to school, that information, those foundational topics are helpful to any of the students.
I know that you talked a little bit last time about grading and like how much we should count this for in terms of grading, but I was just wondering if you could maybe, like, do you have any logistical, like, ideas of what grading might look like for this or giving them credit for this might look like?
So what we were talking about last time, and we're still going to kind of stick to that, is giving you the flexibility in your classroom of how you want the grading. However, we don't want this CCRG, any grades that come from the CCRG, to count for or against the students more than about 10% of their total average. So as an English teacher, and we'll talk more about this in our sessions, but kind of basing it on how much emphasis you're really putting on the CCRG stuff, I would let that correspond with how you grade. And so we did give you a couple of ideas about grading, and I'm sure Dr. Edwards is going to break that down a little bit more, but we definitely don't want it more than about 10% of their total average. So we don't want it to like kill the students that don't have to do it or, whatever, but we also want there to be some accountability for what they're doing. And we'll break that down a little bit more too in our content areas. Dr. Edwards, did you want to add to that?
No, that's fine. Like you said, we'll talk about it a little bit more in our areas because it may differ depending on the type of assignment that you want to use.
Any other big questions before we jump into that content section? Okay, I'm going to put you guys in breakouts. For those of you that aren't teachers, I've got a couple of ICs up here and a couple of principals. If you want to just tell me which section you want to go in, I'm going to stop sharing, and you can just send me in the chat what you would like. So